Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into curled-toe shoes and slapping on a painted grin as we sneak behind the velvet drapes of a court that's laughing through its death rattle. You're not a knight or a noble. You're something more dangerous, the only person the kingdom allowed to tell the truth, so long as it rhymes and preferably ends with someone falling into a mud puddle. You are the court jester. Your crown is felt. Your scepter's a stick with your own face carved into it, and your survival depends entirely on your timing. One bad joke, dungeon. Two, well, let's just say you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You weren't born into court. You were born in the gutter beside it. Too clever for farming, too wiry for fighting, and far too loud for silence. Your first audience was a crowd of fishwives and drunk soldiers tossing copper coins as you juggled apples outside the market gate. You learned quickly that laughter wasn't free. It had to be bought, with risk, with self-mockery, with something a little sharp underneath the giggles. You also learned that people laugh hardest when they're scared. That lesson will stick. The dying kingdom isn't dying fast. It's more of a slow rot. The king's got gout, the queen's got lovers, the prince has a lizard collection and a dead stare, and the peasants have nothing but calluses and curses. But here you are, prancing between them all, jingling like a festive warning bell. You get your start sneaking into a traveling performer's act. One night the fire eater drinks lamp oil and burps out his lungs. Suddenly the slot is open, and there you are, wobbling on stilts and doing impressions of the bishop. A noble laughs too loudly. You get offered a short-term engagement in court. It'll turn into a lifetime. The palace smells like wax and damp stone. You get a cell to sleep in. Technically it's a servant's quarters, but let's be honest, it's a broom closet with a rat that prefers the name Gerald. You share dried peas with him at night. He never laughs at your jokes. Then again, neither does the steward. Your job? Make the king laugh. That's it. But how you do it, that's a minefield. One jester before you did an impression of the royal dog and accidentally barked like the queen. He's now on extended vacation, which is code for buried without ceremony. You get your costume, motley, patchwork, bright as a plague rash. The bells aren't just decorative. They tell everyone where you are at all times. They say it's so you don't sneak up and stab someone. Historians still argue whether jesters were ever truly trusted or merely tolerated because the monarch needed someone to blame when things fell apart. The first night, you perform at the king's supper. He's slumped sideways in his throne, gnawing a bone like a bored dog. You crack 3 jokes, one about a bishop, one about tax collectors, and one that makes fun of your own nose. 2 nobles snort wine. The queen rolls her eyes. The king smirks. That's enough. You're safe. For now. There's a strange power in it, being untouchable and yet so easily disposable. You begin to speak in riddles. You learn how to dodge thrown goblets. You pretend you enjoy it. Sometimes you do. There's a certain thrill in dancing on the edge of exile. Oh, and the food? It's terrible. People think jesters get banquet leftovers. In truth, you get trench scraps and maybe the heel of a cheese will if the scullion likes you. She does not. She once mistook you for a mushroom and tried to stew you. Still, court has its perks. You learn to read, sort of. You snoop through scrolls meant for others. One talks about a neighboring kingdom amassing troops. Another says the grain harvest failed. You start slipping tiny clues into your jokes. Most don't notice. One man does. The spy master. He winks at you the next day. You nearly wet yourself. There's a phrase you learn early. Little folk observe it. The fool who survives. It's whispered like a prayer or a joke or both. Not many do. But you? You're determined to laugh all the way through the kingdom's death rattle. The walls crack. The throne creaks. But your grin only widens. You don't choose to be a jester. Not really. The job chooses you, or maybe it hunts you down when you're young, loud, and incapable of shutting up when a noble passes gas during mass. Your first apprenticeship begins in the town square, under the tutelage of an older fool with missing teeth and a nose like a twisted turnip. He calls himself Master Sprig, though no one remembers why. Possibly because he once danced naked in a cabbage patch and declared it his kingdom. Historians still argue whether early jesters were mentally ill, divinely inspired, or just dangerously bored. Sprig says you'll find out soon enough. Sprig teaches you how to trip without breaking your neck, how to cry while laughing, and, most importantly, how to read a room before you open your mouth. That one takes longer. You flub your first try during a bishop's visit by doing a routine about indulgences. You don't even know what indulgences are. You just thought the word sounded like cheese. You get slapped with a fish and banned from the square for 3 weeks. Timing, Sprig mutters, is the difference between applause and being stoned by stale bread. Your days blur into a crash course in physical comedy. You learn to fall with flair, to tumble without cracking a bone, and to juggle anything from apples to lit candles. Once, someone hands you a dead chicken. You juggle that. 2, laughter is laughter, even if it smells like poultry doom. Sprig also introduces you to your first audience of true importance, the drunk lordlings, sons of nobles who've had too much mead and not enough discipline. They're dangerous, in that bored aristocrat with daddy's sword way. You learn to make them laugh without making them feel mocked. That's a tightrope that even seasoned fools fall from. One bad impression of Lord Elric's stutter, and you're hanging by your ankles over a pig pen for a day. It builds character. And tetanus. You live cheap. If by cheap you mean in a pig shed with 1.5 walls and a goat that snores. But you have something more precious than gold. Stage time. Every day you perform. Markets, taverns, minor courts. Sometimes even funerals. Yes, funerals. You learn that nobles love a distraction, even when burying a relative. You once perform a puppet show while a viscount is being lowered into the ground. No one notices the puppet has his mustache. They're too busy laughing. Eventually you're noticed. Not by talent scouts or agents. Those don't exist. No, you're noticed by the king's food taster. He's drunk, thinks you're a hallucination, and tells the steward about the goblin who made his pie laugh. By some miracle, that turns into a summons. You leave Sprig behind. He slaps you once hard on the back of the head. Don't die stupid, he says. If you die, die clever. You don't cry, not until the cart's out of sight. Your arrival at the palace is uneventful. No fanfare, no trumpets. Just a grumpy stable hand, a lice-infested tunic, and a man in a red robe who tells you not to speak unless spoken to. You immediately respond with, "What if I'm spoken to in mime?" That earns you a slap and a promotion to potential fool. Training continues. There are other jesters in court, and they're not happy to see you. You're young. You're fast. You haven't broken a rib yet. They smell competition. You smell like goat. Gerald will be proud. Each day you're tested. Can you impersonate the bishop without getting executed? Can you turn a beheading into a comedy sketch? Can you make the king laugh while he's constipated? Yes, but only with heavy mime and very light satire. Then comes your final trial, the Festival of Mirth, a court tradition older than half the turrets, where jesters compete for the crown's favor. The winner gets a contract. The loser gets banished, or eaten by dogs. It varies. You prepare by polishing routines, sharpening insults, and sewing extra bells onto your cap because, apparently, more jingles means more joy. On the day of the festival, you perform third, right after Merry Tom and Bleeding Gertie, who ends her act with nosebleed and a tambourine solo. Tough act to follow. Your turn. You open with a joke about the king's gout. Risky. You follow with a dance that mimics the queen's favorite hound. Riskier. You close by juggling 3 apples, one of which explodes into a flock of feathers. Sprig taught you that one. The court erupts. Even the steward snorts. The king actually guffaws. You're in. The apprenticeship is over. You're a court jester now. You got a hat that weighs like guilt and a name that no longer belongs to the person you were. Still, you smile, because you've made it to the top of the bottom. The first time you were the full motley, it doesn't feel like a costume. It feels like armor, not the metal kind that deflects swords, but the softer kind that deflects consequence. Or so you hope. The outfit is absurd. A patchwork tunic of mismatched fabric, each square shouting a different color. Violet, mustard, bloody red, and something suspiciously green. Your leggings don't match, and your shoes curl like question marks. There are bells on everything. Your shoes, your collar, your hat. They jingle with every step, every twitch, every accidental fart. You sound like a walking festival and smell like mothballs and fear. But in court, this look is power. It says, yes, I'm ridiculous, but you're the one who needs me to laugh. The bells serve more than comic effect. Historically, they were thought to ward off evil spirits. Though honestly, most evil spirits would flee at the sight of your mustard yellow left sleeve. Some scholars argue that the jester's outfit also signaled controlled chaos. The king's pet chaos, leashed and wagging its tail. Your reflection in the polished wine goblet looks like someone else entirely. And that's perfect, because from now on you're not you. You're the fool, a living symbol of inversion, permitted to mock what others dare not name. The king doesn't laugh easily. His lips move like a dying caterpillar when amused. You begin to catalog his reactions. The single nostril flare, mild chuckle, the full-toothed grimace, deep belly laugh, and the one finger wave, stop now or be flogged. You're building a vocabulary of survival. You test boundaries. Carefully, a joke about the queen's jewelry earns a polite titter from her and a murderous glance from the chamberlain. A pun about the bishop's sermon gets you pelted with stale sweetmeats. One time, you recite a limerick that includes the words buttocks, papal bull, and ferrets. You are not summoned to dinner that night. There's a hierarchy in the jesting world. At the bottom, jugglers. Slightly above them, mimes. Mid-tier, animal trainers, depending on how well their geese perform. You're somewhere in the top third because you can do impressions and limericks. The true elite, the fools who dare political satire. They're either legends or ghost stories. You meet another jester, Barkin, who served 3 monarchs and has a laugh like a goat being tickled. He tells you something you never forget. The motley's not to amuse the court. It's to remind them you don't belong. You are the sanctioned outsider. Barkin smells like clove oil and bitterness. He dies 3 weeks later, allegedly from excessive mirth. You suspect poison. The court begins to take notice of you, not always in good ways. Some nobles start making the fool the punchline of their own jokes. You play along. Sometimes they ask you to dance with them in private salons. You do once, then twice. The third time, you choreograph a satirical dance mimicking their stiff postures and squeaky shoes. You're banned from salon performances for a month. Worth it. One day, you're called to the royal nursery. The young prince is bored. You juggle for him. He stares like you're a particularly annoying beetle. You do a chicken impression. Still nothing. Finally, you trip over your own foot and knock over a candelabrum. He laughs. The queen does not. The servants look away. Word spreads. You're the jester who can make the royal brat giggle. That's enough to cement your place. For now, your routine evolves. You start using props, masks, spoons, even a wooden puppet named Little Majesty that looks suspiciously like the king if you squint. You keep the squinting subtle. Historians still argue whether jesters ever used puppets to openly parody their rulers, or that was just a clever lie told after the king died. The motley becomes part of you. You sleep in it sometimes, too tired to peel it off. It starts to smell like onion soup and candle wax. One morning, you catch a maid sniffing the collar. She blushes and bolts. You wonder what version of you lives in her imagination. And then, something unexpected, admiration. A young scribe catches you in the hall and recites one of your rhymes back to you. Perfectly. He says it made the steward laugh. So hard, he spit wine. You smile and thank him. Later, you find that rhyme carved into the back of a chamber pot. That's when it hits you. You're not just surviving. You're spreading. You're becoming folklore before your own eyes. That's the dream, right? To be remembered. Even if it's as a limerick scratched into the latrines. You wear the bells proudly now. Not because they jingle, but because they signal something else. You are untouchable, untrusted, uncaged, and someday, if you're clever, unforgettable. The first time you mock the king to his face, your heart races so hard it nearly jingles through your chest louder than your bells. The line isn't even that sharp. Something about his double chin being the kingdom's new border. You expect silence, maybe a cough, maybe a swinging mace. Instead, the king bursts out laughing. Not a chuckle, not a dignified royal guffaw. A full-blown, head thrown back, wheeze that ends with a chunk of pheasant landing in his goblet. And just like that, you understand your true value. You are the only person in this entire rotting kingdom who can say what others merely whisper behind goblets. You're a pressure valve, a dancing, juggling, rhyme-spitting weapon of controlled subversion. But let's be very clear. You're allowed to mock power only so long as power finds amusing. The history books will tell you that jesters held a special status, that they could criticize kings, debate bishops, even make bawdy jokes about war councils. What the books won't tell you is that every jester had a mental list, updated daily, of what not to joke about. You keep yours tucked behind your eyes like a prayer. The queen's monthly melancholies, the missing taxes from the southern provinces, the prince's refusal to speak Latin or bathe, the royal cook's resemblance to the dead dog, and most sacred of all, anything about the king's first wife. You tread the line. Some days you dance on it. One afternoon, during a banquet with visiting nobles, you perform a skit about a greedy baron who eats all the grain during a famine. Everyone laughs, except the baron, who turns out to be seated behind a very large vase. That night, you find your chamber pot filled with mashed turnips and a note reading, "Sleep with one eye open, fool." Still, you start noticing who laughs hardest, who waits to see the king's reaction first, who doesn't laugh at all. You begin to map the power grid of the room with your eyes, while your mouth delivers zingers. It's like juggling, but with landmines. You develop a trick, an old favorite among jesters, speaking in the voice of another, a puppet, a songbird, a talking dog. The dog always gets away with murder. You once had the dog bark out a joke about the bishop's sermons being sleepier than a hibernating snail. The court roared. The bishop fumed. But the king simply shook his head and said, "He's only a dog." That dog saves your life more than once. And there's more. You learn that sometimes the king wants to be insulted. It reassures him he's still in control, that he can laugh at himself. Historians still argue whether this was ego, insecurity, or boredom. Likely all three. Royalty has a way of turning self-humiliation into sport, provided someone else is doing it for them. One night, you're summoned to the royal bedchamber. Not for pleasure, thank the stars, but for performance. The king is half drunk on mulled wine, surrounded by half-asleep guards and one very awake advisor. He asks you to tell him what the people really think of him. You joke, you mime, you throw in a fart noise for good measure. But behind the slapstick, you slip in the truth. They think your majesty rules with wisdom, but mostly rules with wine. Silence. Then the king laughs. A long, slow, rattling laugh. You're dismissed with a nod, but the advisor follows you out. No words, just a glance that says, "Careful." That's when it sinks in. You're not just the joke maker. You're the barometer. When things get tense, they watch you to see if it's safe to laugh. Of course, power can turn on you just as fast. You hear stories. A jester who mimicked the queen's limp and disappeared overnight. Another who sang a parody of the royal anthem and woke up toothless. Sprig once told you, you don't die when they stop laughing. You die when they start pretending they still do. So you craft every performance like a tapestry, humor on the surface, survival stitched underneath. If a noble looks too grim, you deflect. If the king looks bored, you tease the steward instead. If the queen's eyes narrow, you compliment her hound's hair instead of hers. You become fluent in not saying things. That's half the craft. It's not what you joke about. It's what you never joke about. And yet there's a thrill. Every time you get away with it, every time your words dance along the edge of offense without falling in, it feels like flying, like the bells on your cap might lift you off the floor if only you laugh hard enough. One afternoon, after a particularly bold performance that ended with a mock coronation of a stuffed pig, the king claps you on the shoulder and says, "You've got teeth for a fool." You grin. But inside, you wonder, is that praise or a warning? You sleep with your hat by your side that night, just in case you need to jingle your way into forgiveness. Your days don't follow the sun. They follow the whims of court. There's no routine in your routine. Some mornings begin with a breakfast performance in the solar, juggling boiled eggs while the queen pokes at her porridge with mild disgust. Other days start with a summons at dawn, when the king wakes from a bad dream and demands a fool to chase away the night. You learn to function on little sleep, interrupted meals, and the constant dread that you'll be called to perform at the exact moment you're mid-chamber pot. Being a jester isn't just telling jokes. It's a full-time performance. You're always on. Walking down the corridor, better pratfall when the steward passes. Passing the royal chapel, mimic the monk's nasal chant when no one's looking. Caught slouching on a bench, you're doing a satire of tired peasants. Obviously, the court expects entertainment at every flick of its royal fingers. You sing, you dance, you pretend to be a frog during supper because someone mentioned liking amphibians, and now that's your identity for the day. The dining hall is your stage. It smells like meat, smoke, and desperation. Each meal is a performance, a mix of scripted jokes and improvised humiliation. You quickly learn to keep one eye on the king and the other on the roast boar, because if a noble gets bored before dessert, you are dessert. It's not all laughter. Sometimes the humor turns mean. You're asked to mock the crippled noble, to mimic the stammering envoy, to crawl on all fours while they toss bread at you. The line between comedy and cruelty blurs. You laugh with them, never at them, but the them keeps shifting. One evening, a drunken baron throws wine in your face and demands an encore of your goat impression. You oblige. He howls with laughter. You sleep in the stables that night, too ashamed to face your reflection. Still, there are bright spots. The kitchen boy leaves you scraps of honey cake when he can. One of the seamstresses stitches a secret pocket into your motley. She hides a sliver of lavender inside. For luck, she says. You carry it with you for years. And then there's Gerald. Yes, the rat. Still alive. Still indifferent. He now lives behind a loose stone in your chamber wall, occasionally poking out during your monologues. You like to think he's your harshest critic. There's also a rotating cast of entertainers, musicians, fire eaters, illusionists, each staying for a season or two before vanishing like smoke. Some leave with coin, others with rumors. A few leave in coffins. You befriend a musician named Finn. He plays the lute like he's apologizing to it. Together, you develop a comedy ballad about a knight who falls in love with his own reflection. It becomes a court favorite. The king demands it at every feast for a month, until someone suggests it sounds a bit like Prince Elric. Suddenly, the song vanishes from your set list. Finn disappears 2 days later. No explanation. Just gone. You perform at weddings, coronations, and even executions. That last one's tricky. How do you warm up a crowd that's there to watch someone die? Answer, you don't. You stall. You distract. You pretend the whole thing is theater until the axe falls, and the crowd forgets they flinched. You once quip, better a fool in motley than a wise man on the block. It earns a tense silence, followed by a single clap from the steward. You don't sleep well that night. But then there are nights when everything works. When your timing is flawless, your jokes land like rain on thirsty soil, and the king actually wipes tears from his eyes. Tears of joy, not gout-induced agony. Those nights, you feel like a god in patchwork, jingling with divine authority. Historians still argue whether jesters were truly entertainers or secret advisors. You're starting to think they were both. After all, who else dares whisper what no one else will say, wrapped in a rhyme, disguised as a pun? But even gods have to eat. You get paid irregularly, usually in wine, bread, or favors. 1 month you receive a goose, a live goose. It chases you around your room for an hour before settling on your pillow. You name it Majesty. It's gone by morning, probably into the stew pot. You keep a journal, of sorts, scratched into the inside of a wooden flute with a knife. It's not much. Names, phrases, jokes that made the king laugh hard enough to spill his cup. You figure someone, someday, might read it. Maybe laugh. Maybe understand. You don't dream often. But when you do, you're always falling, and the bells are ringing all the way down. The kingdom begins to rock quietly, at first. It starts with whispers. The bread is thinner. The salt barrels arrive late. A merchant's cart is found overturned on the east road. Its driver vanished. Its goods looted. No one says famine. Not yet. They say a poor harvest, or seasonal trouble, or a slight shortfall. But you know better. You can taste it in the watery stew. You can hear it in the growl of empty bellies between laughs. And still you perform. That's the curse of the jester. While the world crumbles, you must pretend it's a stage prop. You must juggle while the ceiling leaks. You must rhyme while the rats claim new dominion over the pantry. And if you dare point out, it must come with a smile. The people in town begin to murmur. Prices rise. Bread lines stretch. The guards are stationed not just at the gates, but now outside bakeries and granaries. You make a joke about it one evening. What's the difference between a loaf of bread and a noble? One feeds the people. The other eats 3 loaves. Laughter. Uneasy but real. But you've stepped into dangerous territory. That night, the steward corners you in the corridor, his breath hot and wine sour. Tone it down, he hisses. The king is sensitive. You nod, but you also carve that line into the flute. It got a laugh. That means something. There are fewer feasts now. The royal menu grows humbler. Pigeon replaces peacock. Turnips become a delicacy. You mock the meals with exaggerated swooning. and declarations of eternal love to a particularly soggy leek. The queen finds it charming. The kitchen staff does not. Historians still argue whether jesters were simply puppets or subtle critics of their time. You feel like both. You're part of the pageantry that hides the rot, but your eyes are open. One day, a peasant delegation is brought before the king. They kneel in tattered clothes and beg for grain. You're standing just off to the side, balancing a fake chicken on your head. The king waves them away with a yawn. Tell them to pray harder. You speak before you think. Perhaps if they prayed with chickens on their heads, Your Majesty, the gods might hear them faster. Silence. Then laughter, not from the king. From the court, a ripple that grows into a wave. Even the queen covers her mouth. The king finally chuckles once, then glares. You're not punished. Not outwardly. But for the next week, you're not summoned. Your food portions shrink. Your name is left off performance lists. It's not exile. It's starvation. You spend that week sitting by the fireless hearth in your chamber, speaking only to Gerald the rat. He's unimpressed by your monologues. One night, you catch yourself reciting jokes to the mouse hole. You laugh, then cry, then sleep in the motley, hat and all. The court begins to show signs of stress. The nobles argue louder, drink earlier. The prince has started ordering birds from the garden to be brought to his chambers, not to keep, but to dissect. You once find a sparrow's wing in the chapel. You say nothing. You're brought back to the main hall during a feast honoring a visiting duke. Your job? Lighten the mood. You go big. A full pantomime of court life, complete with a wooden stick for a scepter and a pie-tin crown. You walk with a limp. You squint. You burp dramatically. Everyone laughs. Hard. Too hard. Because it's not just funny, it's accurate. Everyone knows who you're imitating. Even the duke chuckles. The king does not. That night, your hat goes missing. You find in the latrine pit, bells still faintly chiming. You wash it. Wear it anyway, because you're not giving them the satisfaction of seeing you bareheaded. The kingdom's decline becomes harder to hide. The winter is brutal. Roads freeze. Trade slows. The noble children fall ill. Even the court physicians are visibly panicked. You do a skit pretending to be the royal leech collector. This one's for headaches, you say, holding up a large slug. And this one's for forgetting you were once kind. Only the queen laughs. You start slipping observations into your songs. Not outright mockery, just truths wrapped in melody. If the grain is gone and the wine is thin, then who feasts now and who grows thin? It becomes a favorite lullaby among the servants. One morning, you're approached by a scribe in the library. He asks if you'll help him write a satire. Anonymous, of course. You refuse, not because you're loyal, but because you know better. Satire with no jester's hat to shield. It is just treason waiting to be drawn and quartered. And yet you consider it. For the first time, you start wondering what it would take for laughter to become resistance. The bells on your cap are quieter these days. Or maybe you just hear them differently now. They call it juggling knives. But in your case, it's literal. The court's gone hungry for sharper laughs. And nothing gets nobles chortling like danger. So now you juggle actual blades during feasts, 3 at a time, sometimes 4. The court loves it. The sharper the risk, the more they shriek with glee. And if you cut yourself, even better. Blood makes the best punchline. You've sliced your thumb twice, gashed your palm once, and once nearly lost a toe when a dagger skidded off a wine jug and embedded itself in your boot. You limp through the rest of the act, juggling one-handed while singing about a barmaid with 3 husbands and no pants. Standing ovation. But the danger isn't just steel and spectacle, it's politics. You're now a favorite among several powerful nobles, which is the most dangerous place to be in a dying court. They each want you to perform at their private salons, whisper a clever jab at a rival, slip innuendo into your riddles that everyone understands but no one can accuse. You're passed around like a rare wine, poured into goblets of ambition. One baron wants you to make fun of the steward. A duchess wants you to humiliate the bishop. A general wants you to impersonate the king's sleeping habits. But gently, fool gently. All of them want plausible deniability. If something goes wrong, it's your head on the chopping block. One evening, you're summoned to a dinner hosted by Lady Brent. She's clever, cruel, and extremely bored. You arrive to find a table set with veal, grapes, and gossip. She requests a performance. You do your routine. Impressions, juggling, the satirical poem about a chicken in a bishop's hat. They laugh. Then she leans forward and says, "Now do the king." The room goes still. Your mouth dries instantly. "Pardon, my lady?" She smiles sweetly. "Come now. You've done everyone else." Surely His Majesty isn't off limits. He is. You know he is. But the silence stretches like a noose. You think of Sprig. If you die, die clever. So you improvise. You imitate the king's throne, empty, regal, and slightly tilted. Then you do a dance where your feet move in slow circles, pausing every few steps to yawn. A royal stroll through state matters. You explain. They laugh. You sweat. You survive. Historians still argue whether jesters were spies, pawns, or informants. You're beginning to think it's all the same. Because every laugh you earn in those private dinners is also a signature on your own arrest warrant, waiting to be activated. One morning, the steward pulls you aside. He's pale, thin. His fingernails tremble. He speaks low. They say you become favored. By too many. He doesn't finish the thought. He doesn't have to. You nod. From then on, you start losing invitations. You feign illness. Hide behind tapestries. Even Gerald, your rat roommate, seems to approve. But withdrawal comes with cost. Rumors swirl. You're called the ghost fool. Some claim you've gone mad. Others whisper you've written a book of jokes so dangerous it was burned by the Inquisitor himself. You encourage the myths. Better to be the whisper behind the curtain than the fool in the spotlight when the knives are thrown. Meanwhile, the court continues its slow unraveling. The food is worse. The laughter more forced. The queen's pet dog dies. She mourns it with more tears than she gave her uncle. You're called in to cheer her. You do a puppet show with tiny crowns and stuffed animals. She doesn't laugh, but she doesn't cry either. Success. The prince still doesn't laugh. He watches everything with those glassy eyes, stroking a taxidermy raven as though it speaks to him. He says nothing, not even when you slip and fall during a dance, not even when a juggled pear hits him squarely in the chest. He just watches. You start to wonder if he's even real. Then one day, he passes you in the corridor and says softly, "You shouldn't have done the throne dance." Your blood goes cold, but he keeps walking, trailing a scent of ink and mildew. So now you juggle with your ears open and your mouth half shut. Every joke you tell is checked and rechecked in your mind before it escapes your lips. Every laugh is weighed for sincerity. Every silence is a warning. And the knives? You still juggle them. Because, ironically, the steel is the safest part of your job. At least when the blades fall, you can see them coming. You learn to speak in riddles. Not for flair. Not to be clever. But because in this court, saying what you mean is suicidal. So instead, you twist your words into loops, wrap truths in rhyme, and hide accusations in allegory. You're a poet now by necessity. The jester's tongue, you discover, is sharper than any sword, because it can cut from behind a smile, And unlike the nobles, you're allowed to wield it. That's the paradox. You're powerless and yet permitted to hint at the most dangerous truths in the kingdom, so long as you keep it funny, so long as it rhymes. You begin composing innocent tales, parables, one about a fox who grows fat while the hens starve, one about a lion king who dreams of war but forgets his claws are made of wax, one about a rat who whispers into the queen's ear until she thinks herself a mouse. The court loves them. They laugh, loudly, uncomfortably. Who's the rat, you think? You overhear one noble ask. Who isn't? Replies another. Historians still argue whether these tales were warnings, critiques, or just entertainment. You know the truth. They were all three. That's the trick. If the story is layered enough, no one can quite punish you, because everyone thinks it was about someone else. You get bolder. In one performance, you stage a mock debate between two marionettes, one a fat purse, the other an empty grain sack. Their argument ends in the grain sack being eaten. You barely finish the scene before the audience explodes in laughter. The steward is beet red. The queen doesn't smile. But the king, he claps, slowly. I enjoy that little purse, he says. It reminds me of my chancellor. And just like that, the chancellor is gone within a fortnight. No explanation. No replacement. The court calls it coincidence. You call it poetry. You start using songs, too. Quiet, lilting lullabies that drift through the halls long after the feast has ended. Servants hum them. Maids whisper them. Nobles pretend not to know the verses. Until one day, the prince hums a few lines under his breath during prayer. That's when you know you become more than entertainment. You become a channel. But power like that doesn't go unnoticed. One morning, you find a parchment tucked under your pillow. No signature. Just 3 lines. When the mask tells truth too well, the mirror may be blamed for hell. Choose silence or choose fall. You burn the note, not because you're afraid, but because you're not entirely sure who wrote it. The steward? The queen? The prince? Yourself? You begin to dream of fire, of a stage ablaze, with your motley smoldering at your feet. You wake to the scent of lavender, faint and fading, from the seamstress's old charm, still tucked inside your sleeve. You grip it like a prayer. The risk grows. One just misheard, one line misread, and the meaning shifts like sand. You start adding disclaimers. Of course, no resemblance to our noble court. But everyone knows it's hollow. That's the thrill. That's the fear. One evening, a noble slaps his wine cup down mid-performance. You speak too freely, fool, he growls. You bow low. Forgive me, my lord. My tongue often wanders. I suspect it has legs. The court laughs. He does not. You're not invited back to his wing for a month. And yet, they keep asking for more. More tales. More poems. More biting verse masked as jest. You become the court's collective conscience in disguise. The dark truth sung softly enough to soothe the soul without alerting the sword. But it takes its toll. You no longer sleep well. You dream in verse. You wake with rhymes etched into your palm from gripping your flute too hard. Sometimes you write a line and can't tell whether it's meant to be funny or prophetic. One evening you pen, when the crown falls, the fool is crushed beneath it. You throw that line into the fire. The queen starts watching you more closely, not just listening. Watching. Her eyes don't blink when you perform. You're not sure she's amused or measuring you. The steward stops smiling entirely. And the prince? He speaks again. One sentence. Just one, after a performance where you portray a puppet king ruled by strings made of coin. He says, you should learn to cut strings gently. You nod, but you don't know how, because the deeper you go, the harder it is to tell where the jokes end and the truth begins. And if you don't know, how can anyone else? The plague doesn't knock. It slithers in. At first, it's just a rumor, a whisper from a kitchen boy about a merchant's wife in the outer district who turned purple and died in her soup. You joke about it. At least she was well seasoned. Nervous laughter. Always nervous. These days. Then a courtier coughs during a banquet. Just once. But people scoot their chairs back like he's turned into a bonfire. A day later, he's gone. No announcement. Just gone. The black flags start appearing quietly. On doors, carts, the infirmary gate. The chapel bells toll constantly, like a child hitting a pan for attention. You mimic it in your routine. Every ring means someone else missed a soup course. Laughter. Thin. Tired. Scared. Soon, half the staff is missing. The scullery girl. The scribe who loved riddles. Even one of the guards who always gave you extra bread crusts. Gone. The halls echo now. Echo too much. Historians still argue whether the plague changed the balance of power in Europe, whether the empty spaces left by the dead made room for new voices, new systems. In the court, it doesn't feel like a shift. It feels like rot, like a meal left out too long. You're told not to perform. Too risky, they say. No gatherings, no feasts, but the king overrules them. If I must die, he wheezes, I'd rather do it laughing. So you perform, to smaller audiences, more spaced out. You joke about the spacing. You pace 6 feet apart from your own shadow. You cough dramatically, then bow. No one laughs. You try new material, songs about love in a time of boils. A puppet show starring a flea and a priest. Still nothing. The court is terrified. Even the nobles can't pretend anymore. Then the queen's favorite maid dies. Just collapses while pouring wine. That night, the queen orders all tapestries burned. The corridors feel naked, like the walls are ashamed. You ask for your usual bowl of onion stew. It arrives late, cold. You eat it anyway. You don't taste anything. You wonder if that's the plague, or just fear. Performances become one-on-one affairs. The prince requests you. You enter his chambers, and the air is thick with incense and silence. He points to the puppet box. You perform without speaking, just gestures. He claps once when you finish. Says, that was better than last time. No words means no lies. You leave shaken. You find new gray hair that night. The king begins coughing, deep rattling, like something's trying to escape his lungs with a shovel. He still demands nightly entertainment. You try to make him laugh, and sometimes he does. Mostly, he watches you like you're aflame, and he's wondering if it'll last the night. One evening, he interrupts your song. Fool, he croaks, will you jest at my funeral? You pause. Depends, your majesty. Will it be catered? A moment of stillness. Then he laughs, harder than he has in weeks. Good, he says. You'll need to be funny. The rest of them will just be hungry. The servants start wearing rags soaked in vinegar around their mouths. You try it. It smells like sour hope. You perform one set dressed in a curtain, pretending to be Lady Quarantine. The court laughs. It's the first time in days. Then the bishop dies. The real one, not your puppet. A sudden collapse in the nave. They say he confessed 3 hours straight, then choked on a wafer. You do not joke about this. Even you know limits. Soon, mass is canceled. Confession is shouted through doors. Meals are taken separately. The king coughs blood on his sleeve. No one dares mention it. And still you perform, not because anyone commands it, but because silence is worse. Laughter, however brittle, is the only proof that something human still lingers here. One night, you finish a show to an audience of 3. 2 asleep, 1 weeping. You pack your puppets. The hall is cold. Empty. You jingle as you walk, but the echo sounds like a death rattle. You find Gerald curled on your blanket when you return to your chamber. He's breathing, barely. You wrap him in your hat and whisper jokes he never laughed at, just in case he finally gets one. The next morning he's gone. You bury him behind the stables. Mark the spot with a bent spoon. You don't cry, not because you're strong, but because you're so tired. The bells on your cap seem heavier now, like each jingle tolls for someone else. Still you put them on. Still you perform. Because if you stop, who will remember that we once laughed? The queen starts smiling at you in a way that feels dangerous. It begins after one of your quieter performances, an improvised poem about lost lovers in locked towers. No jokes, no pratfalls, just rhythm and grief. When you glance toward the throne, her gaze is locked on you like a hawk watching something small and possibly edible. You bow. She nods, slowly, and holds a glance a second too long. The court says nothing, but the silence thickens like curdled cream. A day later, she invites you to her private salon. You're not allowed to refuse. You arrive wearing your most formal motley, the one with only some wine stains. She's seated beneath a vast painted ceiling, a mural of cherubs stabbing serpents. Her ladies-in-waiting are absent. The doors close behind you. "Tell me something true," she says, sipping wine the color of dried blood. You hesitate, then speak. The peasants say the rats are fatter than the children. She blinks, then smiles, and something falls. You grin, that you look lovelier each day, your majesty. She laughs, genuinely, and it makes your skin crawl. You're not sure what the game is, but you know you've just been invited to play it. After that, she calls for you more often, always alone. Sometimes she wants songs, sometimes stories. Sometimes she simply asks questions. Would you flee if the gates fell? Have you ever been in love with a lie? Do you think the king will die soon? You answer carefully. You always do, but no answer ever feels safe. Historians still argue over the role queens played in court politics. Some claim they were passive, others puppeteers. Your queen? She's both. You can't tell if you're amusing her or arming her. One night, she requests a new puppet for your show. "Make it a woman," she says, with a dagger in her smile. You oblige. The puppet becomes a court favorite. Everyone assumes it's about the Duchess from the West. Everyone except the queen, who watches every performance like she's reading a map. You start receiving gifts. A silver thimble, a sprig of lavender, a coin with no king's face. No names are attached, but you always know. Meanwhile, the king deteriorates. He's half shadow, half cough. He speaks less, drinks more. Some days he forgets your name, calling you Sprig or that damn juggler. You never correct him. At court functions, he barely lifts his cup. The queen does the talking now, her voice soft, unshaking. You mimic it once in jest, alone in your chamber, and frighten yourself. The prince remains unreadable. He watches every interaction between you and the queen with his crow-like eyes. You suspect he knows more than anyone. You suspect he cares less than he should. One night, you find a scroll slipped under your door. A poem, in your own meter, but not your hand. The fool who dances on blades so thin will find they pierce beneath the skin. When queens do laugh and kings do fade, a jester may find he's been well played. You burn it. Again, you've burned more warnings than logs lately. And yet, you keep performing. Because now it's not just about survival. It's about knowing the plot. You're in the thick of something, and you hate yourself for loving it, for craving the closeness to power, for whispering jokes into the ear of someone who might be writing the kingdom's final chapter. You hear the rumors. The queen has a new advisor. The steward is watching her closely. The royal food taster now samples her wine twice. One afternoon, she gives you a new request. Next time, bring the puppet with the crown. You freeze. That one hasn't been used in a while. You say cautiously, "Exactly," she replies. "It's time." So you bring it. A puppet king, made of cloth and wood, with a painted smile and glass eyes. You once used it to joke about taxation. Now, its presence alone feels like prophecy. You perform a short sketch. The puppet king forgets who he is, misplaces a scepter, and names his fool the new ruler by accident. The court laughs, but the queen doesn't. She simply watches and claps, slowly, just once. You feel the applause like a dagger pressed to your back. That night, you dream of the puppet coming to life. It smiles, then strangles you with its string. You wake up sweating. The bells on your hat shiver with your heartbeat. Still, you go on, because a fool with power is still a fool. But a fool without power? That's just a corpse waiting to happen. You're summoned to the prince's chambers, not for performance. No loot, no puppet box, just you, your motley, and a half-rotted sense of composure. The messenger says, he requests your presence. Immediately, you don't ask why. You never ask why. The prince's chambers are colder than the rest of the palace. No tapestries, no fire, no attendants, just stone and silence, and the faint smell of something once alive. You've heard the rumors. He keeps a menagerie of dead things. Birds, mice, a fox cub preserved in a glass jar. They say he studies them like holy texts. He sits in a window seat when you enter, legs drawn up, fingers stroking a raven's wing. Not a live raven. You don't ask. You make people laugh, he says, without looking at you. That is my burden, you reply with a shallow bow. Make me laugh. There's no smile in his voice. It's not a request. You try the safest route. A face, a silly walk, a nonsense rhyme about a baker and a goose. Nothing. You tell a joke about a friar, a pig, and a misplaced blessing. Still nothing. He turns. His eyes are pale and wide. Do you think I'm mad? You blink. Mad, my prince? You collect dead birds. You speak to tapestries. And you've worn the same tunic for 3 weeks. I would never dream to presume sanity. A pause. Then a snort. The smallest breath of amusement. Progress. He gestures. You sit. On the cold floor. No cushion offered. They think I don't know what's happening, he says. But I see everything. The steward. The queen. The food shortages. The songs the servants sing when they think no one hears. You nod. I see you two. That's when your heart skips. Because it's not said in warning. It's said like a mirror being polished and held up. You're not just a fool, he says. You're a witness. You try to deflect. And witnesses get tied to the stake for blinking too loudly, your grace. He doesn't smile. You tell the truth, even when it's wrapped in feathers and fart jokes. Feathers are underrated. You mumble, farts less so. He sets the raven down beside him. I want a favor. You groan theatrically. If it's bird-related. He cuts in. I want a puppet. You blink. Of whom? Of me. You hesitate. To flatter or to mock? Whichever feels more honest, he says, and that's the moment you know. He's not mad. He's preparing. Historians still argue whether the prince was a pawn, a tyrant in waiting, or a recluse shaped by a collapsing world. You suspect he's all of those and none. What he is, most of all, is watching. You carve the puppet yourself. A slender figure, all elbows and long fingers, with a stitched mouth and glassy eyes. You show it to no one. Not yet. When you deliver it to his chambers, he nods. Now make it speak. So you do. You voice the puppet carefully. No mockery, no jest, just quiet observations. You make it ask why the king sleeps so often, why the nobles whisper, why the queen has taken the long walks with the steward. He listens, he smiles, and then he says, "Let's write a show." So you do, in secret, in strange, candlelit hours, while the court sleeps or mourns or trembles. It's not a comedy. Not really. It's a reflection, a shadow play of the kingdom, of its power, of its decline. And at the center, a puppet prince who says nothing and sees everything. You rehearse it once in silence, alone. It terrifies you. The next day, the prince is gone. No note, no noise. His chambers are stripped bare. The raven is gone. The puppet remains, left sitting on the windowsill, gazing out. The official word is illness. You know better. Everyone does. But no one says it, because no one wants to be next. You keep the puppet, not because you want to, because you don't know what else to do with it. That evening, you perform a brief, simple song for the king. No prince, no queen, just you and the man who once laughed at your chicken impression. He falls asleep before the second verse. You finish anyway, because that's what the fool does, even when no one listens, even when the show ends before the curtain drops. There's a chill in the air now, not just from the stone corridors or the thinning tapestries, but from something else, something tighter, thicker. You feel it every time you speak. Whispers follow you like mice, quiet, constant, and gnawing. A noble woman goes missing, gone to a convent. They say, though no one specifies which one. A scribe falls down the stairs, despite being 25 and spry. A cook is arrested for corrupting the royal broth. What does that even mean? You perform less, not because you're idle, but because every word must be measured. You spend more time in silence now, carving new puppets, smoothing old masks, sorting which jokes are safe and which might see you strung up on a hook. And then the witch hunt begins. It starts with a single accusation. A servant girl found muttering near the chapel. A noble swears she made his wine spoil. She's taken. Screams echoed down the courtyard that night. The next day, they burn her garments in the square. You make no joke about it. No rhyme. Nothing. But others do, behind closed doors. Nervous humor, sharp as nails. You hear your own voice, twisted into parody. The fool who dances under a red moon wears soot on his collar. It's your line. Not anymore. The steward calls you to his chambers. His fingers tremble as he pours wine. "Be careful," he says. "They're listening now." You blink. "Who?" He doesn't answer. Instead, he hands you a list. Names. Mostly servants. One noble. One priest. One jester? You laugh. Then stop. "Is this a joke?" "No," he says. "This is a performance. And you're in the final act. You're dismissed. That night, you pack a bag. Not much, just your smallest puppet, a loaf of stale bread, the lavender charm, and the dagger you've never had to use. Yet, you consider fleeing. Through the postern gate, into the woods. You've heard of fools who escape their courts and live among actors or thieves. One became mayor of a pig-farming town. But you don't run, because it wouldn't matter. Not now. Instead, you return to your role. If this is the final act, then you'll steal the scene. You request a private audience with the queen. She grants it. Of course she does. She's seated in a high-backed chair, shadowed by candlelight, a ring on every finger. "You've been quiet," she says. "I've been watching," you reply. Her lips twitch. Good. Then you've seen what's necessary. You nod. And what comes next? She leans forward. Control, through fear, through ritual, through fire if needed. She offers you a choice: aid her in cleansing court, or disappear with the rest. Historians still debate whether queens orchestrated witch hunts as power plays or genuinely believe in their cause. This queen? You don't think she cares either way. You agree. What else can you do? She gives you a scroll, a script. Perform this at the next court gathering, she says. Make them laugh. Make them believe. You read it later. It's grotesque. A parody of a witch, complete with goat bleeding and twitching limbs. It's not satire. It's propaganda. You could refuse. Burn the script. Flee. Die. Or rewrite it. So you do. You take the queen's outline and reshape it. You keep the goat. Add a bishop. Add a noble. Add yourself. The jester accused. The fool on trial. Saved only by laughter and the mercy of truth. The day of the performance arrives. The court is quiet, half full, half fearful. You take the stage. You dance. You bleat. You burn. Pretend flames licking at your feet as you scream confessions of imaginary sins. I cursed the soup. I juggled on Sundays. I kissed a frog and liked it. Laughter, thin, desperate, but real. Then comes a twist. You point at the puppet noble. But he told me to. Gasps. Then more laughter. Nervous. Uncertain. You bow. Later that night, a noble is arrested. Not burned. Not yet. But the queen's message is clear. You have served her purpose. But also maybe your own. Because the crowd saw you point. And they laughed. And they wondered. You lie awake that night, bells muffled, heart loud. Not safe, but still alive. And in a dying kingdom. That's the best any fool can hope for. The feast is obscene. You're summoned to Grand Hall 2 hours before dusk, where the cooks are already sweating over vats of steaming broth. Whole roast animals turning slowly on iron spits. The air is thick with spices and desperation. The kingdom is starving, but tonight, there will be excess. A celebration, they say. Of what? No one is quite sure. Maybe survival. Maybe denial. Tables groan under the weight of meat pies, candied fruits, loaves of bread as wide as shields. It's grotesque. A banquet thrown in the shadow of a plague pit. A chorus of indulgence to drown out the moaning of the sick. You're not just performing tonight. You're hosting. The queen insisted. The king hasn't left his chambers in days, but his chair is placed at the head of the table nonetheless. A puppet of him, your puppet, is seated there, dressed in miniature robes, crowned slightly askew. A joke. Everyone pretends, but one line with something darker. When you're announced, you enter wearing your motley and a mask, half white, half black, a grinning line sewn across the mouth. The laughter draws is hollow. They're already drunk. You begin the evening with a toast. To the survivors. May your neighbors stay sick just long enough to leave their food unattended. Cheers erupt, cups clink, but no one drinks deeply. They know better now. A roasted peacock is brought in, its feathers fan like a battlefield flag. The nobles cheer. A man 2 seats down quietly vomits into his sleeve. You do your routine, juggling, limericks, the puppets. Tonight, they demand darker humor. They laugh hardest when you pretend to be a coughing bishop administering last rites to himself. There's a moment during your monologue, mocking a noble who hoards grain, where you lock eyes with a steward. His face doesn't change, but his goblet remains untouched. Historians still argue whether jesters were complicit in court corruption or simply mirrors held up too long. You feel like both tonight. A clown smeared in grease paint and ash. A course of game birds is brought in but no one touches them. Your puppet prince recites a poem. The meat is sweet when the people are thin. A belly full keeps the conscience in. Applause. Nervous. Too loud. The queen enters late. She wears a gown stitched with golden vines, her eyes rimmed with kohl, her fingers heavy with new rings. She glides to her seat, surveys the room, and nods to you. The finale. You unveil your piece de resistance, a short play titled The Coronation of the Fat King. It features 3 puppets, a king too bloated to rise, a queen with eyes sewn shut, and a fool who whispers every royal decree. They laugh. They howl. Even the steward claps. Then the puppet king topples. The fool places a crown on his own head. Silence. Just a beat. Then the queen stands. She begins to clap. Slow. Precise. Others join, not sure if it's praise or performance. You bow, lower than usual, eyes to the floor. After the feast, as the wine settles into the noble's veins and the room fills with drooping eyelids and snoring snorts, you slip out, through a servant door, down the corridor behind the tapestry of the burning saint. You stop outside the king's chamber. It's quiet. You knock once. No answer. Inside, the room smells of sickness and cinnamon. The bed is empty. You turn. The queen stands in the doorway, her shadow long and sharp. He's gone, she says simply. You nod. Was it tonight? You ask. She shrugs. He stopped coughing this morning. I let him rest. A pause. Will there be an announcement? Tomorrow, she says, after the bells. You realize you're still wearing the mask. You take it off. She watches. Do you want a new routine? You ask. She considers. No, she says. I want the same one, just with a different crown. You nod. She leaves. You sit in the king's chair, your bells silent, your eyes heavy. The puppet king still grins from the banquet hall. The real one doesn't anymore. The siege begins not with trumpets, but with silence. The messengers stop coming. The gates close more tightly. Then one morning, you wake to find the towers lined with archers and the steward hands shaking worse than usual. He tells you flatly, we are surrounded. No enemy banners. Not yet. Just shapes in the distance. Fires that burn at night. Rumors. The baker claims they're mercenaries from the northern territories. The stable master whispers they're rebels. Starving farmers turn soldiers. The queen, of course, says nothing. But you know this. They are not here to laugh. Inside the castle, panic wears perfume. Nobles try to carry on with their routines. Feasts still happen. Smaller, tighter, quieter. You perform, but now it's less comedy and more distraction. People laugh too fast, too loud. Some weep when you finish. You create a new puppet, a knight with broken limbs and a mouth that moves but makes no sound. You don't name it. Everyone knows it's us. Historians still argue whether the siege marked the end of the kingdom or merely revealed it had already died. You stop wondering. You just play your part. Food grows scarce. A noble slaps a servant for bringing wilted herbs. You turn into a skit the next day, performing as a noble who mistakes tree bark for truffles. The hall erupts, partly from amusement, partly from hunger. You eat less. Bread crust, broth made of old bones, once a boiled onion that made you cry harder than your best jokes. Gerald would have loved it. One night, you find a rat in the wine cellar. Not Gerald, a stranger. You chase it off but leave a bit of cheese behind. Solidarity. The queen meets with the remaining council in secret. You sneak in once, hiding behind a curtain, holding your breath so long you see stars. They speak of surrender, of sacrifices, of cutting away the unnecessary. You wonder which one you are. You try to find the prince. His chambers are locked. The raven puppet is gone from the window. You start to think maybe he was never real, just another of your characters. At a small gathering, you're asked to lift spirits. So you do the puppet play again, the one with the fat king and the whispering fool. Only this time, the puppet king is carried off stage by invisible hands. No one laughs. The next day, the steward tells you the grain stores are empty. They'll start rationing. He says, "You'll get yours. You're essential." You want to laugh. Essential. You, a jester with bells that jingle like a funeral dirge. That night, from the battlements, you see torches outside the walls. Hundreds, thousands. The enemy has made their presence known. No fanfare, just heat, stillness, promise. You tell no jokes that day. The queen calls you to her solar. She's in a plain dress now. No jewels, no attendants. You're good at pretending, she says. That's why I trust you. I've only ever been pretending, you reply. She hands you a letter. If I die, this goes to the general. He'll know what to do. You take it. And if I die, she doesn't blink. Then I misjudge you. You nod. For once, you have no quip. The castle changes. Less laughter. More prayer. More silence. More eyes darting toward the gates. Nobles grow thinner, paler. Some vanish entirely. No one asks where they've gone. You keep performing. Always performing. Because if you stop, the whole illusion breaks. And if the illusion breaks, they might remember they're already defeated. You rehearse a new routine. A puppet show about a castle that eats itself. You don't know if you'll ever perform it. But you rehearse anyway. Because even now, especially now, someone has to tell the truth. Even if it's with a wooden smile and a painted crown. You begin performing for ghosts. The halls are nearly empty now. Stone corridors echoing with footsteps that might be yours or might be memory. The grand chamber where you once played a dozens now hosts a handful. 3 nobles, 1 priest, and a dog that hasn't barked in days. You do a bit about noble blood being replaced by wine. The priest chuckles, then coughs, then doesn't stop. You wonder if he'll be there tomorrow. You talk more to your puppets these days. Not just on stage, but in your chamber. You ask the prince puppet what he thinks of the siege. You ask the raven if it still dreams of flying. You ask Gerald, though he's long gone, if he would have stayed or found a hole in the wall and run like hell. The walls moan the wind. Or maybe it's just the castle remembering what it used to be. Every morning, you wake and wait for the queen's summons. Some days it comes. Some days it doesn't. You keep your motley by the door regardless. The bells sound duller now. Maybe it's your ears. Maybe it's the air. One afternoon, you wander into the old chapel. No one stops you. No one can. Really, the altar is draped in dust. You do an impromptu sermon. Blessed be the fool, for he shall inherit the audience. You bow. No applause. Just a spider dangling in silence. You begun writing jokes in charcoal on the wall of your chamber. Not for anyone else. Just so something will outlast you. One reads, "A king, a queen, and a jester walk into a plague." Only one comes out laughing. You don't even chuckle. The queen sends for you that night. She looks thinner, sharper, like a dagger honed by worry. "I want performance," she says. "Anything in particular?" you ask. "Hope," she says. "Make them believe it's not over." So you try. You create a new puppet, a simple figure with no crown, no robe, just a face and a smile. A commoner, a nobody. You call it tomorrow. In the grand hall, before your scattered audience, you perform a fable, a village under siege, a fool who plants seeds in winter, a town that laughs at him, until, come spring, green shoots crack the frost. The fool, You say, voice low, was not mad. He simply believed in something after. Silence. Then, a smattering of applause. It's enough. Later. The queen finds you in the hallway. That was well done. You bow, but you don't smile. Do you believe it? She asks. I'm a jester. You reply. I lie for a living. She nods, but not always. You nod back, because that's true, too. The next day, the gates shake, not from battering, but from rot. One of the hinges snaps. The guards don't even fix it. What's the point? You're not asked to perform that night. You do anyway, in your room, for the puppets, for the ghosts, for yourself. One last line. Even when the audience leaves, the fool continues to play. You whisper like a prayer. You dream of a field filled with broken crowns. The puppets walk among them, hand in hand. In the distance, someone laughs. You wake with tears in your eyes. The king dies quietly. No fanfare, no procession, no final decree. Just a servant who finds him slumped in a chair by the fire, wine still warm in his goblet, lips parted like he'd been about to say something clever and never got the chance. You don't find out until hours later. By then, the queen has already had the body moved, the room scrubbed, the steward summoned. A single bell tolls once, then nothing. You're summoned that night, not to perform, but to witness. He's laid out in the chapel. No crowd, just the queen, the steward, and you. She gestures for you to approach. He looks smaller, as if death pressed all the power out of him like air from a wineskin. His crown rests on his chest. His hands are folded around it. The fingers are waxy, familiar. Say something, she whispers. You blink. Me? She nods. He laughed for you. That makes you the closest thing to a priest he ever had. You step forward. Clear your throat. You don't reach for a joke. You just say, he died as he lived, half listening. The steward stifles a laugh. The queen doesn't. Later that night, she drinks heavily. You're asked to sit with her, not perform. Just be there. Do you think he was a good man? She asks. I think he was a man. You say, and that's rare enough in kings. She swirls her wine. You'll stay with me. You nod slowly. And when the others find out he's gone, her mouth hardens. They won't. Not yet. There's no coronation. Not immediately. No new king. Just quiet adjustments. The steward issues new decrees in the queen's name. The guard ship patrols. The council meets behind closed doors. The court is still dying, but now it dies with ceremony. You're given a new title, Royal Voice of Mirth and Council. It sounds important. It isn't, but it gives you permission to stay, to see, to survive. Your jokes change, not because they have to, because you do. You no longer tease the king. He's beyond it now. Instead, your jests turn inward, on the court, on the walls, on the very act pretending things are fine. You create a new act, the coronation of silence. A puppet show where no one speaks, no one leads, and everyone waits for someone else to make a decision. It ends with the puppets bowing to a weather vane. The court doesn't know what to make of it. The queen does. She calls you cruel, but she says it with a smile. Historians still argue if the jester became more powerful after the king's death. You don't feel powerful. You feel tired, worn at the edges, like parchment left in the rain. The court grows stranger. Nobles vanish in the night. Others whisper of revolts beyond the hills. The steward's eyes are ringed with sleeplessness. The queen keeps a knife under her pillow now. You know because she tells you so. You should carry one too, she says. Even fools have enemies. You carry your old dagger in your boot. It rusts from neglect. Then one day, you see something you shouldn't. Two men, cloaked, huddle with a steward in the library, unrolling maps. You recognize the symbols, siege formations, ration lines. They're planning something, not defense, not retreat, something else. You try to leave quietly, but one of them sees you. The next morning, your chamber door is locked from the outside. You wait for hours. Then it opens. A guard delivers a note. Perform tonight. As usual, you do. Your hands don't tremble. Your voice does. You revive the puppet king, old, broken, coughing, but this time he names the jester as his heir. The audience laughs. Uneasy. Then you have the jester refuse. Too heavy, you say. Too cursed. The puppet bows. Leave the stage. No applause. Just quiet. That night, the queen visits your room. She stands in the doorway, says, "You were always clever." You nod. "Do you still want to live?" she asks. You nod again. Then, "Don't be clever tomorrow." She leaves. You sit with the puppets. One by one, you tuck them away. The raven, the prince, the peasant named Tomorrow. You save the jester for last. Then you blow out the candle and wait for the final curtain. The castle groans louder now. Stones shift in the night. The wind whistles through broken panes. The torches are dimmer, fewer. You start keeping one lit in your chamber, not for light, but to convince yourself the world hasn't stopped spinning. They call a court gathering the next morning. Not a feast, those are long gone. Not a celebration, just a convening. That's the word the steward uses. His face a mask of papery calm. The hall fills slowly. Gaunt faces, thin lips, clothes patched in places no one used to notice. There's no music, just a shuffling of boots and the sound of someone weeping quietly into a scarf. You're asked to open a gathering. The queen's words. No instructions. No guidance. Just do what you always do. So you step forward, jingling faintly, every sound echoing tenfold off the stone walls. Ladies and lords, you begin, and everything in between. Welcome to the final dress rehearsal for reality. A few smiles, mostly hollow. Today's program includes rumors of mutiny, the ceremonial ignoring of famine, and a very special appearance by Hope, last seen fleeing over the western ridge. Laughter, this time, tight, restrained, like a cough swallowed too late. You launch into a short monologue, one you wrote the night before while watching the torch sputter. A tale of a ship that sails in circles. Its crew convinced they're heading home because the stars are upside down and the rats are steering now. They cheer. They toast. The water runs out. You end the story with a shrug. Still, they had great hats. You bow. The queen rises. Everyone stills. "We remain," she says. "That is our victory." You know what that is. A lie, but it's a beautiful one. Afterward, you retreat to the west corridor, where the tapestries once hung. Now just bare walls and hooks remain. You find a child there, one of the kitchen maid's daughters. She's sitting on the floor, staring at the empty hooks. "Where'd the pictures go?" she asks. You sit beside her. "They were tired," you say. "They wanted to lie down." She doesn't laugh, just nods, solemnly, like that makes perfect sense. You give her a small puppet, the Tomorrow puppet. She cradles it like something sacred. "Will she come back?" the child asks. "Only if you remember her name." You reply, "That night." The bells ring. Once, then twice, then silence. A gate collapses. You hear it from your window. The clatter of wood, the squeal of metal, the roar of distant voices. Then nothing. The next day, the castle is different. No guards at the post. No cooks in the kitchen. The steward is gone. His room cleared out. You don't know where he went. Maybe nowhere. Maybe somewhere quiet. You find the queen in the chapel, alone. She doesn't turn when you enter. I think it's over, she says. You wait. She places her hand on the altar, not with a bang, with a whisper. Or a whimper, you add. She nods. You should go. You blink. Where? She doesn't answer. Just hands you a satchel. Inside bread, a flask, a key, and your puppet, the Jester, cleaned, repaired. You're not needed here anymore, she says. You leave that afternoon, not through the front, through a tunnel you hadn't known existed, beneath the kitchens, behind a false wall. A gift from the steward, long ago. The last thing you hear as you climb out into the woods is the faint jingle of your bells, your own footsteps, your own breath. Freedom tastes like cold wind and burnt rosemary. You walk until night. You sleep beneath a tree. You dream of the court, not in ruin, but as it was. Laughter, light, even Gerald. And somewhere in a dream, someone whispers, "Make them remember." You wake with dirt in your nails and the Jester puppet in your arms. The kingdom is behind you, but the fool walks on. The road is not kind to fools. Your motley, once garish and bright, is now faded, wash in rain, stained with mud, frayed at the hems. The bells still jingle faintly with each step, but they sound less like laughter now and more like echoes of somewhere you've already left behind. You don't know where you're going, just away from stone halls and dying kings, away from puppet courts and queens who smile like blades, away from eyes that watched and hand that pointed. You're not a jester anymore, but you're not anything else, either. The villages you pass through are empty or fearful. People hide behind shutters. A few leave offerings at doorways, onions, salt, charms made of twigs and string. You take only what you need. You leave behind a joke scratched into a wall or a puppet made of twine, a silent thank you. Historians still debate what became of court jesters after the fall of kingdoms. Some say they vanished into poverty. Others say they became prophets, madmen, saints. You don't feel like any of those. Just someone who saw too much. You reach a river town after 4 days of walking. They let you stay in the barn. You perform for the children. Quiet, soft shows, no jabs, no satire. Just laughter. Real laughter. You haven't heard it in so long that it sounds like music. One boy tugged your sleeve after the show. Were you from the castle? You pause, then nod. Once. Is it true what they say? That the queen had horns? That the king slept for 100 years? You smile, only if you want it to be. He nods solemnly, satisfied with that answer. You leave the next morning. Each town brings a new rumor. The castle burned. The queen fled. The prince turned into a bird. You say nothing. You only perform. Sometimes you tell the story of the fat king and the whispering fool. Sometimes the one about the court ruled by puppets. Sometimes the tale of tomorrow, a girl who plants seeds in dead soil and waits for something green. The stories change with the wind, but they always end the same, with a jester who walks away. You start writing them down, in margins of torn pages, on scraps of wood, on the insides of puppet heads. You leave them behind like breadcrumbs. One night, you dream of the castle, not in ruin but restored, lit with firelight and music. You're there performing. The king laughs. The queen claps. The prince sits with a raven on his shoulder. You wake with tears in your eyes, and you write it down, because if you don't, no one else will. In a small village tucked between two hills, you're invited to perform at a wedding. The bride wears wildflowers. The groom limps from an old wound. You sing a ballad about love in a time of siege. The old women cry. The young men laugh. You're paid in bread and honey. You stay for 2 days, then leave, always moving. Because something in you broke when the court died. Not just grief, not fear, something older, something shaped like silence. And yet you still jingle. Even now, even alone, you find an abandoned tower one evening, just off the main road, ivy covered, leaning slightly. Inside, the walls are damp but safe. You light a small fire. You unpack the puppets. And you perform. No audience. No applause. Just you. And the echo. The jester dances. Because the jester always dances. Not for kings. Not for queens. But because the stories must go on. Time forgets quickly. The castle where you once danced is just a name now. The hollow keep, some call it. The rat court. The crooked crown. Everyone has a version. None of them are yours. You hear them in taverns and marketplaces, pass between strangers like coins. A fool ruled in secret. A queen who drank poison from a silver cup. A prince made of glass. You say nothing. You sip your broth. You listen. One evening, a bard sings a ballad with verse about the jester who whispered to kings. The rhyme is wrong. The name is lost. But you smile anyway. You're not in the songs. Not really. Just a shadow. A trick of memory. And that's fine. History prefers symbols to people. You wander farther south. The air warms. The people laugh louder. Less fear in their eyes. The plague has passed, or at least, it's learned to be polite. In a seaside town, you're asked to perform at a harvest festival. You do. You bring out the puppet king, but this time he's kind. A farmer. Maybe he gives away bread. He chases chickens. He never wears the crown right. The people laugh. Not nervously. Not carefully. Just laugh. Afterward, a girl hands you a flower. Were you really there? She asks. In the old kingdom? You pause. What was it like? You think of the banquet. The silence. The bells. Louder than it should have been. You say. She nods, not understanding. Then runs off to chase her brothers. You sit by the sea that night. The waves crash soft against the shore. You hold the jester puppet in your lap. I kept going. You whisper, I told it all. The puppet says nothing. It never did. You begin writing again, not jokes, not fables. Just truths. The stories behind the stories. What really happened, or what felt true. Historians still argue whether the hollow keep ever existed. Some claim it was metaphor. Others say it sank into the earth. A warning, a curse. But you were there. You saw the queen cry. You heard the king's last laugh. You buried a rat with a spoon for a gravestone. You danced at the edge of the world and lived. You leave the sea behind. Take to the hills. The forests. You perform only when asked. You carry the motley like a relic now. Not to wear, but to remember. One spring morning, you pass a farmhouse and hear a child singing one of your old rhymes. The king had gold, the queen had grace, but the jester kept them both in place. You smile. You don't stop, because somewhere, out there, someone still remembers. Someone always will. And that's enough. Years pass. The jester becomes a story, then a whisper, then a game children play in alleyways, balancing on barrels and calling each other your majesty before toppling into laughter. No one remembers your name. Not the real one, anyway, but they remember the bells, the voice, the way you made the silence bearable when the plague was loud, when the court was colder than stone. You live quietly now, in a village too small to have a wall, and too kind to ask questions. You mend tools. You tell stories. Sometimes you're invited to speak at weddings or funerals or the first snowfall of the year. You never wear the motley anymore, but you keep it wrapped in a bundle under your cot. The colors faded, the bells dulled, but still whole. Sometimes, on long evenings, children gather outside your door. "Tell us the one about the fat king," they shout. "Tell us the joke that made the queen drop her spoon." You sigh every time like it's such a burden, and then you tell it again, just a little different each time. Because the truth doesn't need to be exact. It just needs to feel right. A traveler passes through your village one spring. He speaks of a ruined castle to the north, hollow halls, a chapel with a broken altar, ivy choking the stones. Some say it's cursed. Others say it's sacred. The traveler asks if you've heard of it. You shake your head. "I've heard of a place like that. Long ago." He nods. "They say there was a fool who lived there once." You smile gently. Sounds like a good story. That night, you walk to the edge of the fields. The stars are thick. The air is warm. You sit beneath a tree and breathe in the quiet. The jester puppet sits beside you. You don't speak. Not to it. Not aloud. But the silence between you is full of memory. Not sorrow. Not pride. Just presence. In the distance, a bell rings. You don't know why. A wedding? A funeral? But for once, it doesn't matter. Because you're not in the court anymore. You're in the story. And the story goes on. The stars drift overhead, soft and slow, like embers in a hearth long forgotten. The wind moves gently through the trees, brushing the grass with the hush of old lullabies. You sit quietly, breathing with the earth, letting the noise of everything fade into something gentler, quieter, easier. Whatever you carried, the motley, the jokes, the ghosts of that crumbling kingdom, they've settled now. They no longer press on your back like a burden. They rest beside you, content just to be remembered. The fireflies blink their slow, golden messages. The moon stretches across the sky like a pale coin, tossed by the gods and caught on its edge. You stretch your legs. You lean into the night. The world has turned so many times since the feast, since the fall, since the final performance. And yet here you are, still breathing, still walking, still you. It's okay now. You've done enough. Let the story breathe without you. Let it wander. Let it be retold and twisted and misremembered. As all good stories are, you close your eyes, and for the first time in a long time, you don't hear the jingle of bells. You just hear peace. Sleep well, old fool. The kingdom dreams. And so do you.